My next witness is Kathryn Arnold.
Kathryn Arnold. Right, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Will you please state your name for the record?
Kathryn Arnold.
All right. And what is your profession?
I am an entertainment industry consultant, and I also serve as an expert witness.
Okay. And can you please tell the jury your educational background?
Yes. So I've been in the entertainment industry for over 20 plus years. I started as an assistant at ICM, which is one of the largest talent agencies in Los Angeles that represents actors, writers, and directors. And I worked with the talent agent there. And then I also worked at William Morris, for William Morris, as a script reader. So I was working on scripts that they were delivered and submitted to for their actors, writers, and directors. After that, I went into development of film and television projects for a company based in New York called the Maltese Company, which actually produced animated television shows and feature films based on Wall Street, animated product, like toys. And then I went to work with a company called the Goober Peters Company. And Goober Peters was, at the time, one of the largest production companies in Los Angeles. They did films like Batman and Rain Man and Tango and Cash. They did TV shows like Witches of Eastwick. And there I was involved in the development of scripts. We worked with the studio directly in terms of what cast would be attached to the scripts and brought directors and talent to those projects. I then went on to work in, there's a lot. I went on to work in the independent film world as a film producer. So I found the material, I would get the financing, I would get the cast and the director attached to the project. We call that packaging. And then we would go and obtain financing for that either through equity sources or international sales and financing and bank financing. And then I also went on after that. I produced 5 or 6 films with actors that you may know, including Salma Hayek, Vincent D'Onofrio, Kirstie Alley, Thomas Jane, Ethan Hawke. And then I worked with a international sales and production company where I was the head of production, and I worked again on the development of scripts and the procurement of financing. So I worked in both the independent world and the studio world, meaning independently financed or financed by the big studios like Warner Brothers and Disney and Paramount and such as that. That's the bulk of my work in the entertainment industry.
Did any of your films win awards?
A couple of them did. So a couple of the independent films that I produced, one of them won, called The Coriolis Effect, won the Venice Film Festival in its category. And then I also produced another film that won the Heartland Film Festival Award. It's called the Crystal Award.
All right. And what other video production projects have you been involved in?
So throughout that time, in between those jobs, I also worked in the corporate world. So large studios like Warner Brothers and Disney and CBS would need corporate videos for their live events. So I would interview executives and interview their talent and then edit the piece together to create video and media for their live sales conferences that they had at that time. And then I also produced some commercials.
All right. And what, if any, experience did you have in corporate relations and licensing?
So early on in my career, I worked at the Los Angeles Olympic Organizing Committee, and I worked in the licensing department where we handled the licensing of the Olympic logo, and we also worked with sponsors and suppliers who were funding those Olympic Games. So it was a lot of contractual negotiations with the use of the logo, as well as raising money for the games and working with those corporate sponsors throughout the 2 years prior to the games and then during the games themselves.
And what, if any, experience do you have working on film festivals?
Well, I've had films in festivals. I've actually been very lucky to travel the world and gone to a lot of festivals with my films, both here in the United States and elsewhere. And at one point, I was also hired to raise sponsorship funds for the Sundance Film Festival. They had a new program that they were starting to do online festivals, and so I raised about $500,000 for them in about a month.
All right. And do you have a degree, a college degree?
Yes, I graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's degree in economics.
What does your current consulting practice entail?
So as an entertainment consultant, having been in the business in both the independent and the studio worlds as both a producer and an executive, I work with investment companies and production companies who are looking to navigate the various inroads of Hollywood. It's a business that's very different and unlike anything else and very relationship based. So I use my 20 years of experience to help them get cast, get financing, understand the distribution process, marketing process, and get them set up to be able to produce their films.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in the field of entertainment industry?
Yes.
Okay. Approximately how many times have you served as an expert?
I've been involved in somewhere between 85 and 100 cases as an expert, from beginning stages to testifying in court.
And have you ever testified as an expert on damages and defamation cases?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And approximately how many times have you qualified as an expert on that?
On defamation?
Yes.
I believe 3 or 4 times.
Okay. And have you ever been admitted to testify as an expert on damages?
Yes.
Okay. And how many times have you qualified as an expert on damages?
Almost all my cases have some form of damage economic damage related to the case. So I would say in all of the cases that I've testified in, I've been qualified in damages.
Okay. Have you ever served as an expert for both? Have you served as an expert for both plaintiffs and defendants?
Yes, I have.
Okay. How much of your current practice involves consulting as opposed to serving as an expert witness?
So over the last 10 or 12 years, it's been about 50-50. So I spend half my time working as a consultant and the other half working with lawyers on their cases.
Your Honor, I'm going to move to qualify Kathryn Arnold as an expert in the entertainment industry standards and practices and related economic damages.
All right. Any objection? All right. So moved.
Thank you. Now, you have a dual role here as an expert, correct?
Yes.
Now, you're going to be testifying with respect to Mr. Depp's challenges to or claims of damages, and you're also going to be testifying to Amber Heard's damages, correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to start you with Mr. Depp's claims for damages.
Okay.
With respect to Mr. Depp's claimed damages, on what subject have you been asked to offer your opinion?
So I was asked to assess any alleged damages that the op-ed piece in the Washington Post that Ms. Heard wrote, whether that have impacted his career in any way, particularly did he lose any income or any economic opportunities because of the op-ed piece specifically.
All right. And have you been asked to limit that to the period of December 18, 2018, with the date of the op-ed, through November 2, 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what materials did you review in making your analysis?
There were a lot of documents. I reviewed the pleadings of the case, the complaints, the discovery items, the responses to what they call interrogatories, which are the questions that the lawyers ask both sides. I reviewed Mr. Depp's deposition testimony, which there were volumes of that, as well as Ms. Heard's. I also reviewed the deposition testimony of the experts that were proffered that had to do with the entertainment industry, the agents and the management teams of both sides. Ron Schnell, the data expert. I also reviewed emails and texts between the parties, between their families, between their management teams, the audio recordings, the visual recordings that have been presented in this case and the previous cases that have been involved in the last couple of years. I also did my own independent research from general publicity and press and investigative articles, as well as those that are specific to the entertainment industry and utilized some entertainment industry specific sources to get some information that was helpful to my case, to that case.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. Please describe for the jury your observations with respect to Mr. Depp's career trajectory.
Well, Mr. Depp has had an extraordinary career over many years, so it's a long one to look at. Obviously, he was a rising star in the late 80s and in the 90s, starting with 21 Jump Street, and you've heard, all the films that I'm sure he's been in. He really started to break through when he worked with Tim Burton, the director, and of course his character Jack Sparrow in Pirates of the Caribbean was, world renowned. And probably his biggest role. And he was, a well-liked, both critically and within the industry and within the public as a movie star. And at the same time, his behavior and both on and off the set, in his personal life and in his professional life, start to interfere with what we would say, what everybody saw was his great talent. And it started, there's some stories of issues that started back in the 80s and the 90s, but I would say really in the mid-2000s, between 2006 and 10, is when the behavior started affecting his work to a certain extent in terms of lateness on set. And then as Ms. Jacobs, his talent agent, discussed with you in her deposition, it really started to affect her ability to get roles and the industry's willingness to work with him, given the issues that he was having with both behavior, tardiness, drinking, and the drug abuse, and other issues in his personal life. So it got more complicated for her to find him work, and I think it got harder for production companies and studios to hire him due to the challenges that would put on a production.
And when did Mr. Depp's career downturn begin, based on your review of all the record evidence?
Well, again, according to Ms. Jacobs, his agent, she mentioned that it started getting more challenging for her around 2010. The lateness on set she was being made aware of that more and more often from production executives and the producers that she was working with on the Pirates movie. And not only Pirates, it continued on the other films, including Mordecai and Murder on the Orient Express. And in around 2014, when he had the appearance, it was presumed that he was under the effects of alcohol at the Hollywood Film Awards in 2014.
Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive.
She's answering the career downturn, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Please continue.
Thank you. In 2014, when Mr. Depp appeared in the Hollywood Film Awards, Ms. Jacobs received many phone calls from both producers, casting directors, and production executives asking her what is going on with your client, why, what's going on with his behavior, can we get him under control? And then I think it really started to shift around the Pirates 5 movie in Australia with, again, the lateness and the issues with the singer that stopped production and things of that nature. And then it got harder and harder.
Now, based on your analysis, what has caused Mr. Depp's career downturn?
Objection. No foundation.
Overruled.
Can you please repeat the question?
Based on your analysis, what has caused Mr. Depp's career downturn? And I realize you've said a number of those, so just is there anything else?
Sure. Well, we've talked about the erratic behavior, the tardiness, the drugs and alcohol abuse, and the lawsuits have had a really big impact, not just this lawsuit, but previous lawsuits that Mr. Depp has been involved with, because there's a lot of publicity around anything that he does. And every time he has filed a lawsuit, it has brought to light various issues with respect to whatever that lawsuit was about, whether it was about, erratic behavior or domestic abuse or drugs and alcohol and even spending habits. So every time a lawsuit has been filed, the press and the publicity has just been charged up and brought everything back to light. And it's been an unfortunate problem for on that level for the industry to continue to work with him, even though all this is out in the public.
For the films that were shortly before Pirates 5, how successful were they? We're talking Mordecai, Alice Through the Looking Glass. I think you testified to some of those. The Lone Ranger, Tonto.
Right.
Objection, compound.
Overruled.
Of course, Mr. Depp has had some extremely successful films, but also in the 4 or 5 years prior and, through Pirates, there were films that didn't do well at all and were considered what the industry calls a bomb, which could have been Alice Through the Looking Glass, The Transcendence, the Lone Ranger, and Mordecai were films that just didn't perform, although they were valued in their financing based on Mr. Depp's star quality and acting ability. Unfortunately, they just didn't perform. So as many hits as he's had, he's also had a lot of recent, what they call failures in the business.
And what, if anything, did Mr. Depp do with respect to showing up for a press conference in Japan for Mordecai?
Ms. Jacobs mentioned in her deposition testimony that Mr. Depp didn't show up for the press conference in Mordecai, which he was not only an actor for, he was also a producer, and he didn't show up. Apparently he was sleeping, so he wasn't able to make it.
Now, what, if any, impact did the Brooks litigation have on Mr. Depp's career?
Is the jury familiar with this already, or?
Well, I think you can go,
Okay. So the Brooks litigation was, there was a litigation around Mr. Depp had punched someone on one of the, I think it was a location manager on the set of a film called City of Lies. I don't know exactly what happened to that litigation. However, of course, again, it was written a lot about in the press, and unfortunately came to the forefront that he had, violent behavior yet again.
So in 2018, and I'm going to say before the op-ed on December 18, 2018, right, was there any negative articles, negative press about Mr. Depp?
For quite a while, when you're a celebrity such as Mr. Depp, you're in the limelight and everybody wants to look at everything that happens. So after every movie or after every incident, there was usually press. But the ones that were more significant were the ones in the Hollywood, a couple of them in the Hollywood Reporter and one in the Rolling Stone. So in 2017, there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter where the journalist discussed, I think the article was called Pirates of the Caribbean, The Diminishing Returns of Johnny Depp. And that Pirates, the last one was 5, right? And that one didn't perform nearly as well as the other previous Pirates of the Caribbean films. And there was some discussion that the character...
Objection, hearsay, Your Honor.
I think you could explain generally.
Sustained.
Okay. Let me ask you this. When was that Hollywood Reporter article on diminishing returns of Johnny Depp?
That was in the spring of 2017.
Okay. And you said, and I just want to make sure we understand, how well did Pirates 5 do compared to 1 through 4?
It performed less well by over $200 million.
Okay. What, if any, other negative press was there in this time frame? We'll take 2017, 2018, before the op-ed.
So in 2018, there was the Rolling Stones article that was an in-depth expose on Mr. Depp's life. Again, his erratic behavior, the money he was spending on wine.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
I think she can give generally, Your Honor, the negative.
Sustained.
All right. What, if any, knowledge do you have of whether Disney saw the Rolling Stone article?
There were emails between the publicity department and the co-chairs and some of the senior executive Disney that they would forward the articles as they came out, both the Hollywood Reporter article and the Rolling Stones article, and they would make commentary. And Alan Horn, who is the one of the co-chairs of Disney, used the word sad, and I think one of the other executives used depressing, that their film star was now being shown in this light to the public in a Rolling Stones.
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
All right. Was there any more articles about the Pirates of the Caribbean prior to the op-ed in December of 2018?
There was an article in October 28th, the Hollywood Reporter, October 28th, 2018, where the journalist had spoken to two writers of the film, and they were talking
Objection,
about rebooting
hearsay.
the franchise.
She's entitled to rely on hearsay, and she's just giving the general. She's not.
Approach.
So without saying what the article said, say what it's about.
Okay. So in October 28th, the article was about whether the Pirates of the Caribbean
Objection,
franchise
hearsay.
would be rebooted without.
Overruled.
Please continue.
The part where in the article in October 2018 was about whether or not the Pirates franchise was going to be what they call redefined without Johnny Depp, and that was regarding two writers that were on the project.
Okay.
And there was one other one.
Okay, go ahead, please.
So there was another article. There was an expose on the president of production. It was also in the Hollywood Reporter, and this is the one that Mr. Marks, Mr. Depp's expert, pointed to regarding the op-ed's impact on Mr. Depp's career. And the online article was, as Mr. Marks pointed out, published on December 20th of 2018. But the same article was in print on the morning of December 18th, 2018, which is the same morning of the op-ed. So that Hollywood Reporter article that Mr. Marks used to say...
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Please continue.
Mr. Marks had used that article to show that Disney wanted to let go of Mr. Depp because of the op-ed, but it was actually printed in the Reporter the same morning that the Washington Post article was printed. So there's no way that the Washington Post article had any impact on what the Hollywood Reporter journalist wrote. So they were on the same morning. They were released simultaneously, interestingly enough.
And the one that was 2 days later was the same article, just online?
Same article, it was just online, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, what, if anything, was there about press in 2018 relating to the Sun and Dan Wooten and any litigation that Mr. Depp was bringing?
So a lot of press was about the UK trial in the lawsuit that Mr. Depp brought against the Sun in the UK about the wife beater title that they used. So there was a ton of press around that, both at the time that it was filed and throughout as documents were being shared with the public, and then, of course, during the trial itself.
Okay. And what is your understanding of when the article, the wife beater article, first appeared?
I believe it was in July of 2018, about 6 months before the op-ed piece.
And what is your understanding of when Mr. Depp filed suit against the Sun and Mr. Wooten?
Again, in 2018, I believe.
Okay. June, would it be? Would it refresh your recollection?
It was in the spring or summer. It was fairly shortly after the article, so it was long before the op-ed piece was out.
Okay. And what, if any, impact did Mr. Depp's litigation in the Sun case have on his career?
That was a really tough one on Mr. Depp's career because every allegation of abuse and every text, every email, all the audio, all the visual stuff was brought to light and made public. And so not only did the public get to see it, but the industry was watching closely. And it's hard for studios, especially a studio like Disney, who's family oriented, be connected to a star that has texts about burnt corpses and violent behavior in video. So it was a big conflict for a lot of the people in the industry to how to navigate that if they're going to work with a star.
And what, if any, impact did Mr. Depp's other litigation against Mandel and Bloom have during that time period?
As I was trying to say earlier, every time Mr. Depp brings a lawsuit, because he's such a well-known public figure, the spotlight goes on him. So every time a lawsuit was filed, whether it was to his business, against his business manager, against his former lawyer, even when he fired his talent agent, it becomes news. And then everybody talks about what could have preceded that. Why would that lawsuit have happened? And then they look at the details. So again, the erratic behavior and the financial issues and the drinking and drug abuse was all part and parcel of every one of those. And it was brought to light yet again each time.
What is your understanding of Mr. Depp's claims regarding Pirates of the Caribbean 6 and how that impacted?
Well, Mr. Depp is claiming that he's lost money on Pirate 6, but Pirate 6 hasn't even been made yet, nor is there even a script that has been what we call greenlit, moved towards production. So I don't know how you lose something that hasn't happened. So I think that's what you're looking for me to.
And in fact, since Mr. Depp's damages are limited November 2, 2020 and nothing since, and that hasn't happened, is there any way he could claim damages for Pirate 6?
Well,
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Again, you can't claim damages for something that hasn't even happened, whether he was in it or not in it, or was going to be in it, or might have been in it, whether it was 2018 or now. There just is no Pirate 6. Not only did he not have a contract, even back in the day, 2018 or after that, no contract had been signed for a Pirate 6. It doesn't exist as we...
Objection
as we
legal
today.
conclusion.
Sustained in the last part.
How do you know he doesn't have a legal contract?
Well, Ms. Jacobs said he didn't have a legal contract, and also his agents at CAA said he had not yet negotiated a contract for Pirate 6. And again, there is no script, so they haven't greenlit it, as we say. They don't have it cast or with the director yet.
Okay. Based on your analysis, what, if any, impact did Ms. Heard's op-ed have on whether Mr. Depp could claim a loss for Pirate 6?
Zero.
Okay. And why do you say that?
Again, well, many things. The movie doesn't exist yet, so that's one. But even as important is that Disney, in their file for this trial, did not have the op-ed piece as part of all of the information they had read and looked about and discussed. The conversations of Mr. Depp not being in whatever new version of Pirates, the franchise that goes forward, those were in discussions long before the op-ed piece even came out. And there are other factors that Disney was considering: the lateness on set, the cost overruns that costs, which can go from hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars when you have crews sitting around for 2 to 4 hours, 8 hours, or even several weeks to a month when the finger incident happened. So on top of that, Mr. Depp is an expensive actor. He can earn between $20 and $25 million per movie plus back end. So it's very expensive. So when you put that all together, the rising cost of Mr. Depp's talent, the challenges that they had to keep it on budget because of his lateness and his tardiness and all the other allegations that would affect a brand such as Disney, right? Someone talks about a burnt corpse does not necessarily coincide with the brand of Disney. So there were many problems. And interestingly enough, there was a lot of conversation internally in the industry.
Objection hearsay.
She's entitled to rely on hearsay, Your Honor.
Sustained. You can't say it's hearsay.
All right. Please continue without saying what the discussion in the industry was.
the Jack Sparrow character had been exhausted in terms of where it could go creatively. And I think the studio is looking for a way for it to renew the franchise, but not necessarily base it entirely on the Jack Sparrow character, which is where it had ended up the last couple of years.
Okay,
And evidenced by the lesser box office of Pirates 5 compared to the earlier ones.
right. And was there any article that came out on November 5, 2020, 3 days after the damages are cut off, relating to Pirates of the Caribbean and Mr. Depp's chances of being Jack Sparrow?
I think they reiterated the fact that he was probably not going to be in the movie.
Okay. Now, what impact has the op-ed had on Mr. Depp's career?
Very little. Hardly anybody even knew the op-ed existed before he filed suit.
Okay.
If anybody that I know, but certainly not Disney.
Okay. And what impact has the op-ed had on Mr. Depp's Q scores?
According to what I read of Mr. Alan Jacobs, an expert in statistical analysis, and from my own research on websites that are available to us, Mr. Depp's Q score, or if you're familiar with IMDb, which is Internet Movie Database, which is available to public and to the professional side, his Q score did not change dramatically. It was kind of in the middle of exactly the high and low of his Q scores overall. It was in the middle. It was at like 113, which is where it was a couple weeks before and a couple weeks after. So the op-ed didn't have any effect on his Q score, and that was reiterated by Mr. Jacobs in his deposition testimony.
And then you testified in response to an earlier question I had that people, or that nobody seemed to notice the op-ed until Mr. Depp filed suit. Now, that was on March 1, 2019. Do you recall?
Yes, that's when the lawsuit was filed.
And why do you say that they didn't notice until then?
Because the op-ed piece, for most people in the industry, kind of came and went without much fanfare or much conversation. It was much more about I don't think very many people even know it was written until the allegations were made by Mr. Depp in the lawsuit. It kind of came in and out of the radar very quickly, if anybody even saw it at all.
All right. Between December 18, 2018 and November 2, 2020, our window here, has Mr. Depp continued to star in films?
So Mr. Depp, the article the op-ed piece came out December 18 and 20 of 2018. In January and February of 2019, he shot a film called Minamata, which was an independent film that it was what we call a passion project. He loved the script and wanted to do it. So he was able to film that after the op-ed piece. And then the Dior campaign, Sauvage, I don't know the exact dates of filming, but I know that it did air throughout 2019. And it's my understanding that he still may have that contract with Dior, so he continued that product endorsement. And then in in the spring and the fall, I believe it was, Mr. Depp was able to do press for the film Waiting for the Barbarians. He went to the Deauville Film Festival. He went to the Venice Film Festival. He was well received at the press conferences. You know, life was at the same level for him in terms of his popularity over in Europe. They were still, he was still working on press for the films. And then, of course, he was scheduled to film Fantastic Beasts in early November of 2020.
And that's no longer the case, is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Can we approach?
Okay.
And that's no longer the case, correct, on Fantastic Beasts? I don't want you to say anything more than that. That's no longer.
It's no longer the case, correct.
He's no longer in that film, correct?
He was paid for it, but he does not star in the film.
Okay, thank you. Now, what, if any, effect did the op-ed have on Mr. Depp's fan following?
I don't think it had any effect on his fan following. Again, his Q scores didn't shift, and he clearly has a strong fan base.
In your opinion, what or who has caused the damage, if there is any, to Mr. Depp on his career and reputation between December 18, 2018 and November 2, 2020?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
Mr. Depp.
And why do you say that?
Well, again, filing the lawsuits, bringing to light the issues, is Mr. Depp doing that on his own accord? And any statements that were made by his team, Mr. Waldman or anyone else, is associated with Mr. Depp, and those statements that came out, the defamatory statements, which we'll talk about in a minute, were also put out by Mr. Depp's team. So in actuality, he's causing his own demise by bringing these lawsuits forward and continuing to kind of ignite the fire of negative publicity around both of them.
Okay. Are all of your opinions to within a reasonable degree of probability or certainty with respect to Mr. Depp's damages?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to move you to Amber Heard's damages. With respect to Amber Heard's claims for damages, on what subject have you been asked to offer your opinion?
So I was asked to look at the reputational harm and economic loss that Ms. Heard incurred due to the defamatory statements that Mr. Waldman, on behalf of Mr. Depp, made in April of 2020 and again in June of 2020.
And what materials did you review in forming your opinions?
Again, many of the same materials that I reviewed for Mr. Depp's case, which was the deposition testimony, the pleadings, the discovery, all of that was included, as well as expert testimony that was based on statistical analysis of negative social media campaigns that were created, as well as what happened. I talked to Ms. Heard's agents. I read their depositions. I talked to her publicist. I read her deposition. I talked to Ms. Heard herself to get a first-person accounting of what happened from her perspective after those defamatory statements were made. And then I looked at emails back and forth and texts back and forth with the studio, Warner Brothers, and other producers that the management team was working with to get Ms. Heard more work.
Okay. Now, before I go into the questions that I'm going to ask, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of define this so that we're all on the same page going through it. The jury has seen the three defamatory statements. They're defendants 1245, 1246A, and 1247. And I'm just going to refer to them as the Depp/Waldman statements in asking you all these questions. Will you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, good. Please describe Amber Heard's career prior to the publication of the Depp-Waldman statements.
So Amber's had a long career for someone who is not, is fairly young still. She was in over 50 productions, I believe including Aquaman and Justice League, but let's just say close to 50 productions. Certainly 50 productions before the defamatory statements were made. She had, a consistent working actor's career. Her agents were strategic as she started getting more work, that they wanted her to work with better and better directors, to have, the Danish Girl is a film that had a strong director and a strong critical acclaim. And then she went from that to getting Justice League, which is on the bigger budget, is the bigger scale movie, and then, of course, Aquaman and Aquaman 2. So her career was following a very nice, steady rise, and she was on the precipice of a meteoric rise with with Aquaman and Aquaman 2 prior to the statements.
Was Aquaman a successful film in terms of box office sales?
Aquaman was an extremely successful film. It made over $1 billion, and I believe it is the highest grossing DC comic film ever.
Now, what, if any, accolades did Amber receive for her role in Aquaman? And I'm going to call it, sometimes I'll call it Aquaman 1 just to make sure we don't get confused.
Right. So in Aquaman 1, there were many emails from the director and the producer and
Objection, hearsay.
She's just characterizing, Your Honor. She's not quoting them.
Well, I don't know where it's going. I'll overrule at the moment.
Thank you.
She got emails from the director and the producer stating that they loved her performance.
Objection, hearsay.
You can't say what the emails say, but you can summarize them or characterize them. Can you do that?
Accolading emails of accolade from her, from the director and the producer.
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled as to that.
Thank you. Okay. What type of press opportunities did Amber have prior to the Depp Waldman statements?
So the press really loved working with Amber. She was on the cover of many magazines after The Danish Girl, after Justice League, after Aquaman. She was the cover girl, I think it was, of Marie Claire or Elle in the UK. She had a cover story of a big magazine in Mexico and Australia. They were, one magazine called her Woman of the Year, another one called her Role Model of the Year. So she got a lot of press. She did a lot of press, both in magazines, but also in the press tours and the press junkets that she did for the films.
And were some of those California style, Marie Claire, Elle, Shape, Glamour?
Yes, there was a lot of
Objection,
them.
leading.
Overruled. There was a lot of them, so I'm not, don't remember all of them, but it was, GQ, Elle, Marie Claire, the big magazines, both here, the UK, Eastern Europe, in Latin America, and in Australia.
And what about after the release of Aquaman, which was December 2018? How was her press then?
Well, the press tour was doing well, and they wanted to give her a lot more press. And I think up until the defamatory statements came out, she was on deck to do a lot of press. And then it
Objection, no foundation.
Overruled.
Please continue.
So the press and the request for press went silent after the defamatory statements were made, and which then the negative social media campaign ensued after that.
Now, what factors relating to social media does the entertainment industry rely on when considering an actor for a role?
Social media becomes a big part of how studios decide to use an actor or an actress in a film because they want to know how the general public feels about them. They want to know what the consumer feels about that actor. So when there's positive social media, that's a good thing for the actor. When there's negative social media, it can be very bad because not only can social media be directed at the actor or the actors themselves, but it can also be directed towards the movie, towards the movie company, towards the product that the actor or actress is working with. So it becomes very complicated and it can get very messy to continue working with an actor or an actress if there's a lot of negative social media around them.
Okay. And after the Depp Waldman statements, what happened on social media?
After the Depp Waldman statements, social media blew up with negative tweets and Instagram posts and, Facebook posts and Snapchat and trolling, as we call it. It was just negative. According to Mr. Schnell, there was over 1.2 million negative tweets about Amber using hashtags that used the words in the statement of the Depp Waldman statements, that 1.2 million negative statements between April of 2020 and November or January of 21. It's a lot of negative publicity, and there was just a lot of what we call noise around Ms. Heard and her work of any kind.
Can you please describe to the jury what a negative social campaign is?
So, a negative social campaign would be when a fan base, or in this case, according to both the forensic statistical analyst as well as Ms. Heard's agents and the product that she was working with, L'Oreal, and her publicist, it was a campaign that included both live accounts, live Twitter, people that actually are individuals, as well as what we call
Objection. May I be heard?
All right, here come.
All right. Other than the bots, please describe the rest of the social media, the negative social media campaign. What's
The
it
fan
about?
base was very energized by Mr. Is it the Depp Depp?
Yeah, let me just
The
ask
Depp
you-
Waldman. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I
There's a lot
call-
in my brain right now.
It doesn't matter. Why don't I do this? Let me formulate a different question. How has the negative social media campaign been used against Amber Heard since the Depp Waldman statements?
Great. So the negative campaign has been used both to, let's fire Amber off of Aquaman, to the product that she had an endorsement contract with L'Oreal, the makeup. And every time that L'Oreal mentioned Amber Heard and the product together, they would get harassed. Her publicist company was harassed. Any kind of movie that she was related to or television project that she was related to got negative attention from the social media world. Even the charities that she was involved with were getting hammered, if you will, or bombarded by negative social media, which made it difficult to work with Amber on any level because negativity was brought to their product, service, or film.
And is that negative social media campaign ongoing to this day?
Yes.
Okay. And you were talking a little bit before, I think, about remove Amber Heard from Aquaman 2. What were your observations with respect to that in connection to the Depp Waldman statements?
Again, the statements, the social media campaign, whether called, remove Amber from Aquaman or, negativity for her relationship in that film, it always tended to use words that were inside the defamatory statements. They became hashtags, right? So, if it was said in the defamatory statement, they were often reiterated in the tweets and the posts.
Okay. How difficult is it for an actor to repair this type of negative social media?
Well, first of all, it has to stop. Okay, so once it stops, then an actor and their team can work slowly and patiently in both, maybe it's press interviews, maybe it's relationship with charity, maybe it's a small role in a movie and they do well and they kind of rebuild their career. But it can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years or more to rehabilitate your career. But first and foremost, it needs to stop. It just needs to stop so that they can, the consumer can get beyond it and then they can reactivate their career by doing their work again.
Describe Amber Heard's reputation after the Depp Waldman statements.
Well, the reputation, I guess, depends on who you're talking to, but in the public, it's been very negative. In the industry, they like her work, but they can't work with her right now, again, because every time her name is mentioned, the negativity flares up again. So it doesn't make sense for them to try to make a movie which costs millions of dollars and then have a lot of negativity towards the film or the TV show or the product. So her world has been silent in terms of opportunities, and even things that she wanted to work on are no longer available to her.
Has Amber been able to obtain roles after the Depp Waldman statements?
For a long time, no. Very recently, she was able to do a small independent film from some people out of who get their financing out of Europe. But up until that, no, she has not worked.
Now, based on the fact that Amber came out of Aquaman, what would you have expected following the release of Aquaman, December 2018, up to what's going on now?
I like to call Aquaman really, Amber Heard's Star is Born moment. It was that moment where not only was she a good actor, but she was now world renowned because she was in the most successful film almost of all time, if not all time, and certainly for DC Comics. She was on the poster with the very handsome Jason Momoa, and they were this couple, and she was strong and beautiful, and it was just this extraordinary moment for her career to take off, right? Her agents were excited, the producers were excited, everybody just wanted to hit the ground running and let's do more work.
What, if anything, happened to Amber's participation in Aquaman 2?
So for a moment in time in February 2021, there were conversations that Amber's, I'm going to be technical with you, her option for employment was not going to be exercised. So they may not have hired her again, even though she had a contract for it. There was some question as to whether she was going to be hired again on Aquaman 2.
All right. And did ultimately then she still get hired for Aquaman 2?
She did. Her management team fought very hard, and they ultimately ended up hiring her. But also not only because of what her management team did, but Jason Momoa, the star, and James Wan, the director, committed to her in an email saying, if we are involved in this movie, you will
Objection, no foundation, hearsay.
No, sustain the
Don't
objection.
say what
Hearsay.
the email said, just summarize it or describe it,
Oh, okay.
please.
I'm sorry. I'm just trying to understand this world. So her management team worked hard, and Jason Momoa and the director were adamant that she was in the film.
Objection, hearsay.
Worked hard to be in the film.
Your Honor, she has to be able to say that.
Well, sustain as to hearsay. Next question.
So, what, if any, assurances did Mr. Momoa and Mr. Wan give Amber that she would be in Aquaman 2?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
What, if any, are you aware of any chemistry issues between Amber and Jason Momoa from Aquaman?
According to the fact that they did a chemistry test with Ms. Heard and Jason Momoa in order for her to be hired, that is a good indication that they thought the two of them had good chemistry. Obviously, when you look at the movie, they have good chemistry, and the poster, they have good chemistry. So I think it's general awareness that they had great chemistry.
And what, if anything, would also suggest, with respect to Aquaman 2, that Jason Momoa believed they had good chemistry?
He wanted her in the movie.
Okay.
Hearsay.
I think she has to be able to rely on it.
Sustained. Let's strike it from the record.
In your review of all of the record evidence, what, if anything, did you see in writing anywhere that there was ever any chemistry or creative issue with Amber Heard and Jason Momoa from Aquaman 1?
There were no communications whatsoever that there was no chemistry between the two.
And what, if anything, did you, in all the record evidence, did you see that the producer or Jason Momoa did not want Amber Heard in Aquaman 2?
I did not see any evidence of that.
Okay. In fact, the opposite, correct?
Correct, again.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, what, if any, leverage did Amber Heard have to renegotiate her salary under the circumstances of the discussions you were talking about with not exercising her option?
She had zero leverage. She was fighting for her life to stay in the film.
Okay. Now, is it typical for an actor to be able to negotiate an increase in their salary after a successful franchise?
So you may know this already, and so I apologize if you've heard it before. I don't know what's been brought to your attention, but in a franchise such as a potential franchise as Justice League and Aquaman, the customs and practice is that the studio will make an agreement with the actor that incorporates potential future films. So if Justice League does well, they want to know what they're going to pay the actor for the next one and the next one and the next one. And in those successive terms in the contract, the fee for that actor customarily goes up. It can go up by 10%, 20%, 100%. It could double, what have you. And in the case, as Ms. Kovacevic stated in her testimony, that in a successful franchise, that a movie that's made $1 billion, the actors' agents will go back and try to renegotiate that upcoming price tag. So if it was going to be X, they might want it to be 2X or 3X. And that's very standard in the industry to renegotiate your contracts when there's many films in one single contract that each have their own price points.
What, if any, other actors in Aquaman 1 were able to renegotiate their contracts?
Jason Momoa renegotiated his contract very significantly from Aquaman 1 to Aquaman 2.
Do you know roughly how much more?
It went up from the, somewhere between 3 and 4 million to 15 million.
Did Amber have a contract for Aquaman 1?
Yes.
How much was she paid for Aquaman 1?
Aquaman 1, she was paid $2 million.
Okay. And did that same contract provide for if she was in Aquaman 2?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Aquaman 1, I believe she got $1 million. Aquaman 2, she was supposed to get $2 million. I apologize. The numbers, there were a lot of numbers in that one contract. So Aquaman 1, it was $1 million. Aquaman 2, it was going to be $2 million.
All right. Now, based on your experience and knowledge in the industry, how much would Amber Heard have been able to negotiate her contract but for the Depp Waldman statements? For Aquaman 2, I'm asking.
Right. Well, as you can see from Mr. Momoa's contract, that went up exponentially, up to $15 million. Ms. Heard, I don't know if she would have gotten $15 million for the movie, but she certainly could have increased it by $1 or $2 million or even doubled it. So if it was 2, it could have been 4 or even 5 or 6, depending on the enthusiasm if it had just rolled from Aquaman 1 to Aquaman 2 without any of this negativity that was created by the Depp Waldman statements.
What, if anything, happened to Amber's role in Aquaman 2 after the Depp Waldman statements?
It was diminished.
Now, why would Amber have been featured more prominently in Aquaman 2?
Objection, no foundation.
If only a foundation.
Okay. What usually determines, or are you able to speak to whether Amber should have been or would have been more prominently featured in Aquaman 2?
Well, a couple of things.
I'm trying to get your foundation. Are you able to speak to that?
Yes.
Okay. And please tell the basis of that and then your opinion.
So there's 2 things. When 2 actors do well in a romantic relationship and, they get married or they're going to have a baby, you want to follow that through, because part of what did well in Aquaman was not only the action sequences, but to have a strong female character having a relationship with a strong male character, it's very empowering, right? So that was working for them in the first place. The poster of Aquaman that went around the world was, one of the main posters was of the 2 of them together standing proud and strong, right? Being that couple. And so naturally, as you go and develop scripts in the industry, you want to follow on the things that are working. And according to Ms. Heard, when she read the first script for Aquaman 2, she had a strong romantic arc for the entire film. And then she also got to do some great action sequences at the end of that storyline in that script. So she was featured predominantly throughout the script of Aquaman 2 when she first read it.
All right. And then what happened?
Well, she didn't hear anything, so she wasn't getting the scripts when her colleagues were getting the scripts. She heard that through her agents. And then when she got the script, it was pared down from the first script dramatically. They had her in the hospital very shortly in the first part of the movie called Act 1. They had her in the hospital, and they pretty much had her in the hospital, and then she was going to do this action sequence in the end. She trained 5 hours a day for several months with a trainer to do this big action sequence. And then when she got to set, 2 things happened. One, the costume designer said, "I don't know what happened to your role. It got diminished." And
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
All right. Go ahead with the second one.
Okay.
That's
And
right.
more importantly, though, this big action sequence that she was going to do at the end of the movie in the 3rd act was cut out, and they took it away from her. So it was radically reduced from what it was in the script and what she even trained for while she was preparing for the movie.
And what, if any, changes were made to the storyline?
I haven't seen the movie yet specifically, so I can't really speak to that yet.
All right. And when you say she was in the hospital, what do you mean by, was she injured in the first scene?
I believe that in the first act of the movie, she was injured somehow or has something to do with the baby. I don't know exactly. I'm just going with what Ms. Heard told me about, was that she ends up in the hospital early in this new Aquaman 2 movie and doesn't really come out till the end to kind of wrap things up. But all of the interactions with Momoa's character and certainly the action scenes were taken out.
Okay. How has Amber typically been involved in promotions for her films?
As we talked about earlier, actively involved in the press and the promotion, whether that was on the press junkets, what we call when they tour the world and the actors tour together and answer questions from the press at various screenings and film festivals. And then also she was, on the cover of magazines, usually after her movies, especially after Justice League.
And how was the promotion of Aquaman 2 affected by the Depp-Waldman statements?
Amber has not been involved in any of the promotion that's been done to date, or very little, particularly in teasers that I've seen. We call, short little films about the making of and so forth. She's not featured in them. And also, very specifically, there was a big event that Warner Brothers put on during the fandom. I think it's a DC fandom event, which is a big kind of like Comic-Con style event. And they invited all of the actors, or the majority of the actors that have strong roles in film, to participate both in the posters and the artwork, and also participate at DC fandom. And Ms. Heard was not invited to either be in the poster or be at the event. And in fact, they told her she cannot come.
Now, can this hurt Amber's career, not being allowed to be in any of the promotional materials?
Absolutely. It means that nobody knows about her. She doesn't have the same part in the film. It's not going to take her on to her next movie. She's not being associated with the tremendous amount of promotion that's going to be made for this, movie that everybody's looking forward to see. So she's not a part of it because of this negative campaign.
How have the Depp-Waldman statements affected any other films or TV project promotions for Amber?
So prior to the defamatory statements, but either around after or around the time that Aquaman 1 came out, she was in the TV show called The Stand. It was based on a Stephen King novel. So big book, going to be a big TV show. And again, Ms. Heard didn't do any press or promotion for that for the same reasons.
And what, if any, plans were there to have Amber Heard on the cover of LA Style relating to Stand before the Depp-Waldman statements?
Right. So Ms. Heard was in, and they had done an article about her participation in this TV show, The Stand, the Stephen King novel related TV show, and they were going to give her the cover picture and cover story, and they took that away. I don't know if the article existed, but they certainly took away the cover picture and the cover story.
Okay. How have the Depp-Waldman statements affected press requests for Amber?
There aren't any.
So
yes, they affected it because there used to be a lot of press requests, and now there aren't any.
Has Amber Heard obtained any roles since the Depp-Waldman statement?
Again, for many years now, for a good period of time, or a year and a half, 2 years, until she got this small movie called Into the Fire.
Has Amber obtained any studio movie roles since the Depp-Waldman statements?
No.
How, if at all, have Amber's philanthropic opportunities been affected by Depp-Waldman statements?
Again, she had some passion projects. She was invited to do some charity work, and she also had her own passion projects that she, loved and wanted to be involved with and even travel for. But they decided it wasn't going to be a good idea because every time she appears anywhere, the social media negativity campaign starts up again. So she hasn't been able to do any of her charity work.
What is an endorsement?
So an endorsement is when an actor associates themselves with a product, either for print promotion or commercials, like Jennifer Aniston doing the water, or Matthew McConaughey doing the car commercial. That's a product endorsement. He's paid to say that the product is good and be associated with the product.
How important are those endorsements to the actors in the entertainment industry?
Well, very, very important on two levels. One, they bring a good amount of income to them when they're not shooting a movie, so it's a good way to make money in between film roles. And then also, it shows the studios and the production executives and the financiers that the actor is relevant in the community because they're being associated with the product. So if it's a well-known product, that's really great. If it's a medium product, that's great, and so forth and so on. So you want to be, if you can, and if that's something that you like to do, not everybody does, but if they like to do that, then they can get a lot of value out of those product endorsements because then the studios see that there's a connection with the consumer, not just on the film, but also with product.
Did Amber have any endorsement activities prior to the publication of the Depp-Waldman statements?
Yes.
Please explain.
So Amber was hired by L'Oreal to be a product and endorse their product, the makeup line. And she had a $1.5 million contract for 2 years. And they were able to work. They had 20 days of her work. You know, they had the right to work with her for 20 days. And she started the work. And then when the defamatory statements came out, they essentially put a pause on working with her. So they no longer brought her to photo shoots. They no longer had her do public events for the product. And it basically said, we love you, but we can't work with you right now because it's just too much.
Objection, hearsay.
All right. I'll sustain the objection.
Okay.
Question.
Have the Depp Waldman statements affected that deal in any way with L'Oreal?
Well, they put it on pause and haven't done any of the work, so she's not out there in the public eye related to the product. And they have decided to continue working with her at some point once, as I said, this all quiets down, this trial is over, and hopefully the negative campaigns will stop. So they extended her contract, but they did not pay her for that extension.
And has Amber been hired for any other endorsement deals since the Depp Waldman statements?
No.
Now, did you assess Amber's losses as a result of the Depp Waldman statements?
Yes.
What did you do to assess those?
Well, first of all, I looked at Amber's career directly, so I wanted to see, you know, as I said earlier, she worked consistently, and then she was on this kind of very large upswing with the big movies, Justice League and Aquaman and all of that, and The Stand with the Stephen King project. And then it stopped, right? So her work stopped. And then I looked at other actors that kind of grew up at the same time frame, grew up meaning they started their career and had the same time frame to start going from the smaller projects to the well-known director projects to the big movie projects. And I looked at those actors, and I then saw, after they had their Star is Born moment, if you will, I wanted to see where their careers went. So I looked at several actors to see, including Jason Momoa, her co-star, to see what happened in their careers after such a successful film as Aquaman came out.
And why did you use that method of analysis?
It's a very common methodology in the entertainment industry to work with what we call comps. I think Ms. Kovacevic even used that word comp. With films, you try to find comparable films. With actors, you look to see comparable actors. So you can kind of, it's not a distinct actual, this is going to happen, but this is the probability with a reasonable certainty that with the right management team that she had and her acting ability and her looks and the press that she was getting and should have continued to get, that her career would have been similar to these other actors.
Have you used that method in other cases in which you've been an expert on damages?
Yes, I have.
Who did you select as comparable actors for your comparison?
Well, I wanted to look at actors that were in superhero films that had done really well at the box office. So I looked at Jason Momoa, her co-star. I looked at Gal Gadot, who is in Wonder Woman. I looked at Ana de Armas, who was in
Blade Runner?
Thank you, Blade Runner. I looked at Zendaya, who was in Spider-Man, and I looked at Chris Pine, who was in Star Trek and also Wonder Woman. About the similar age range, all attractive actors, all with good acting skills, all able to do stunts. So there are not that many actors to look at who do superhero characters. So it was a small pool to work from, but I took a wide range from those actors, both men and women, to see what could potentially happen to Miss Heard's career.
Do you consider all of them to be identical for purposes of measurement?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, no two actors are identical. You can only look at that within a range of characteristics and work history, management team, and so forth.
And we've heard from Mr. Banya. Did you review Mr. Banya's Q-score analysis regarding the comparables you used?
Yes, I did.
And what, if any, opinions have you formed in reviewing Mr. Banya's analysis regarding the comparables you selected?
So Mr. Banya looked at calendar years to assess what happened in December of 2017 or 18 or 19, what happened in June, what happened in a very specific time frame, which works on some statistical analysis. But when you're talking about actors and the relationships to Q scores are related to the actor's viability and the consumer's mind, if you will, how well known or how much they're coming up in conversation. And so Mr. Bandy did not look at time periods of the actors that I compared them with to the film when it came out. So like right after the success of their big film, what was their Q score? But moreover, he just looked at them in a year range. So it doesn't coincide from actor to actor just because you look at it over time. You have to look at it specifically after each of those individuals' box office success with a particular film. You look at the Q score, high or low during that, and then you look at how low it drops, say a couple months afterwards, and then if it comes back up, if they have another film or another event that brings them into the limelight again. So it's not about time, it's related to a specific activity or event, and he did not do that.
Okay. What did your comparison show in terms of films that those actors had been in since their breakout roles? I'm talking about the comparables.
In terms of their, I'm not quite sure I understand.
Well, what happened with these other actors after they had their stars
Unrelated to
born
Q
moment?
scores were
Right.
Oh, okay, sorry. So all those actors' careers, the ones I mentioned, they all either were a steady rise or even a meteoric rise in terms of where their career went after their Stars Born moment. Then they got some other good films, and maybe they got another film that performed extremely well. So it was a range, but they all were on an upward trajectory without a doubt.
And what does this mean for Amber?
With a reason, I mean, the way that the kind of industry works is usually, unless there is a force majeure or some really negative event, her career should have followed that same upward swing in about the same time frame, give or take 6 months to a year. But it would be very reasonable to believe that her career would have been on an upward trajectory within the range of those other actors.
What, if any, comparisons did you make respecting endorsement deals of these actors with Amber?
You know, again, all those actors that we've talked about all did multiple endorsement deals after their big movies or after their big series of movies. You know, Jason Momoa is on, Rocket Mortgage and Harley Davidson, as well as, 5 or 6 other companies. Zendaya is Lancome and fashion and water and jewelry, and Gal Gadot and Chris Pine and Ana de Armas. They've all done either a couple or many, and all of them have associated with a large brand. Unlike Amber, who hasn't even been able to work on the one contract that she had. She certainly didn't get any others.
So what did your analysis show with respect to Amber Heard's losses, but for the Depp Waldman statements?
They were significant if we follow the trajectory of her, colleagues.
Well, let's start with at Aquaman 2. What would she have realized there?
Well, as I stated earlier, so from Aquaman 1 to 2, it went from $1 million to $2 million, right? So that was a pre-written contract. It doubled. So the agents were very excited after the success of Aquaman to go and negotiate a much higher fee like they did for Jason Momoa. They weren't able to do that. So in that instance alone, it was more than likely a $2 million loss just from that movie alone.
So 2 to 4, you had said before?
It could have been 4, it could have been 6.
Objection leading.
Sustain.
Okay. What about other films?
So once as Amber's agent, Ms. Kovacevic, I was doing okay. Ms. Kovacevic said that once you get that quote of the $2 million from Aquaman 2, that kind of was like the baseline for any other movie she would have done. So any other studio movie would have started from there, and depending on the success of Aquaman and how much press she did, maybe she worked on another great director, independent film, whatever, that $2 million for a studio film, and had it jumped to $4 million with the renegotiation, that then would have been the basis. So any future studio film that she would have done, any big budget film, would have been the basis at $4 million, and then most likely have gone up from there if she was able to get others, which she should have, just like the other actors.
Let's talk about TV for a minute. What would those losses have included?
Well, On the Stand, which was, about the same time as Aquaman, but got the press and the promotion got cut off because of the defamatory statements and the negative campaign. She got paid $200,000 an episode on The Stand. So on a TV series of 9 episodes, it's $1.8 million. So if she had, again, done other TV shows, it's very likely that whether she worked with a streamer or with one of the networks, that fee would have gone up from there. Her agents would have been able to use the leverage of the success of Aquaman 2 to put her, if she had done another television show, given rise to even a higher episodic fee. Some actors go up to $1 million an episode. Jason Momoa is in his TV show got $1 million. So there's an exponential range of where she could have gone.
All right. What about endorsements?
Same thing, all the other actors were doing over the course of a couple years period, anywhere from 5, 6, 7 other endorsement deals. And Ms. Heard realistically should have gotten endorsement deals in other categories. L'Oreal is makeup, so probably not in makeup, but maybe water or clothing or jewelry or wellness, or it could have been anything else. And so she too should have, with a reasonable degree of certainty, gotten other contract deals based on the success of the films that she's been associated with and the TV shows she's been associated with.
And what would that have translated into in terms of dollars?
So in terms of dollars, okay, so if it was $1.5 million for L'Oreal for a 2-year contract, and let's give her 4 other $1.5 or $2 million deals, which all those other actors, especially the ladies, have gotten, then you're looking at an additional $8 million of income over time. I'm not saying this is in one period. We're looking at as far back as the defamatory statements of 2020 to now, which is almost 2 years. And again, as I said earlier, even when this is quiet, it will take 3 to 5 years for her to rehabilitate her career if she can. So we have to look at it as a period of a minimum of 5 years. So when I say $8 million for endorsement contracts, it would have been over time.
What, if any, losses relating to production or film activities?
Well, again, these other actors that we looked at, and there's a wide range of them. Some of them did bigger films and some of them did gigantic films. But it is very reasonable to assume that once you are in an Aquaman-style film, you'll either continue to do those, right? Some of these franchises, as we know, go 4, 5, 6 films, or she would probably have been in another studio film that had nothing to do with Aquaman. But again, so over the course of 5 years, it's very reasonable to consider that she would have been in at least 1 film a year at a minimum of $4 million, because that's what her precedent would have been had she renegotiated. And it's important to note that in her Justice League contract, if there is a Aquaman 3, her price is set at $4 million. So it's very reasonable to assume and to believe that if she did a film a year for 5 years at a minimum of $4 million a year without any negotiation, which probably would have happened, but let's just say that baseline, that would be another $20 million over that time frame.
What, if any, opinions do you have about Amber Heard's earning power over time?
That it would continue to rise. It's customary in the industry, as I've talked about earlier, that the negotiations, especially with her agents at William Morris, her fees would have gone higher. So I'm just using the baseline without any ability to foresee in the future that I already know she got negotiated for $4 million from Aquaman 3. So if we use that as a baseline minimum, but it very well would have gone up had her agents done the work that they wanted to do.
So combining all of these opinions and calculations that you've had, what, if any, range are the losses you are estimating for Amber Heard but for the Depp Waldman statements?
Right, so again, it's really important that I looked at, and hopefully you understand this, that it's over time, right? So let's just say a minimum of 5 years that we're going to talk about these losses, and it could be more, but at minimum, if you look at the film, the television, and the endorsement contracts, it's very likely that Ms. Heard should have earned between $45 and $50 million over that time period.
Are all your opinions to within a reasonable degree of probability or certainty?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, let's go ahead and take our afternoon recess, ladies and gentlemen. Do not do any outside research and do not discuss this case with anybody.
May I sit down?
Yeah, you can step down. That's fine.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. I appreciate it, ma'am. Go ahead. This reminder court is still in session, please. All right, so let's come back at 4 o'clock. We can do that, all right?
Thank you.
4 o'clock.